Hey, so my topic this week was I kind of wanted to look more into some mental illnesses for these next few weeks and kind of how they start to affect um, our learning. And so the first one I chose was ADHD, just because I think that you know it's often seen as a very social thing. So they're talking out of turn, having difficulty paying attention and focusing, but we don't necessarily wonder or think about how it affects their learning as well. And so through the research, I found that it actually affects three areas of behavior. So it affects inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. And so some of the symptoms of inattention and how it affects the learning is that kids tend to make careless mistakes. So they often overlook details, don't read the directions fully, or maybe just can't even focus enough to read the directions fully. And they're easily distracted. They have difficulty in following instructions from teachers or peers or whatever, and a lot of them fail to finish schoolwork. They lose assignments, lose books, supplies, all that kind of stuff. So their brains are just kind of all over the place. Symptoms of the hyperactivity or impulse behaviors. So obviously it's the fidgeting and the squirming, trouble staying seated, excessive talk. They often interrupt and intrude in other people's conversations and activities, and it's just they blurt out answers before the teacher's even finished reading the question. They have trouble playing quietly, and they can tend to be very impatient. And this reminds me of my brother when he was in third grade. He has ADHD, and he would fidget so much the teacher would make him sit with a box on his lap. However, once my mom found out, she wasn't too happy about that. But I mean, it was something that he couldn't sit still in class, and she just needed something to get him to sit still. And also said that children are only considered ADHD if the symptoms are demonstrated so often that it actually causes difficulty in at least two areas of their life, so school and home, and has to persist at least 6 months. So I looked into, kind of how it affects other areas that it affects. It affects, children's self-esteem. They don't really understand kind of why they're not normal, why they can't focus, why they can't, do well in school, and they don't feel like they're doing well in school. And so that makes it really hard for them. And they're often seen as, rude or aggressive, just because they're so impulsive and they've got this hyperactivity. They kind of can't calm down, and then they just blurt out a turn or interrupt, and, people see it that way. So I wanted to kind of flip it and kind of see, how do you help someone with ADHD? How do you manage this? So, it talked about managing the distractions. So, if a child's at home trying to do homework, making sure there's no distractions, no TV. If there's pets in the house, put the pets somewhere else. Other siblings, they need like a quiet space for themselves. Talked about how in classrooms, sitting students away from the door or the windows so they can't see get distracted by what's outside of the classroom. Reduce interruptions. So, it talked about giving, children easy to follow directions, and, showing them where they can go and find the directions again on their own, instead of constantly having to, interrupt them or disrupt their thought process to give them direction. Trying to, manage impulsivity. So, behavioral plans, or, a guided plan, or, guided steps that they can follow that are easy for them to understand, so they don't just right there in front of them. Talked about discipline, and then it said getting them involved in sports and fidget items to easily distract them and kind of get out that extra energy, and to be able to manage the hyperactivity. And so I just thought it was really cool, reading a little bit more into ADHD and kind of how it affects learning and how it affects a child's life, and it continues to affect them as they grow older, and until they can figure out a way to manage it all. And so Obviously, it can be managed with medication, but until somebody can be diagnosed with it, it's really up to teachers and parents to kind of figure out creative ways to capture the child's attention. That's not that they're not smart. It's just that they learn a little bit differently and their brain works a little bit differently. So it's definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration.